Welcome to Shattered Reality with your hosts Kate Valentine and Fahrusha. Prepare to have your paradigms shifted and your truths questioned. And now, Shattered Reality.
Well, here we are again, Fahrusha.
Yeah, Kate, here we are, and it's All Saints Day today, I
Oh, is
believe.
it?
Either All
Oh.
Saints or All Souls. I think All Souls is tomorrow.
Okay.
In any case, here we are on November 1st, 2016. And oh boy, do we have a wonderful guest
Yeah. Yeah.
for you today. A really, really thought provoking and intelligent gentleman. And I have to thank Ms. Shannon Chandler for facilitating this interview by reminding our guest that we had met and we had once spoken about the podcast. So thanks, Shannon. And this is an unusual situation because very seldom do I find that I am going to be introducing a guest who has an even bigger tent than I do, which is to say that he talks about all kinds of things in his two books, that he really has a big, big tent. And so our guest today is Claude Swanson, Ph.D. He went to M.I.T. He got his Ph.D. from Princeton. He is just really a very, very well accomplished gentleman. He has worked in the gravity group at Princeton, and he has focused on experimental cosmology and astronomy. So he has had a lot of experience both in the sort of industrial world, which involved DuPont, United Technologies, the United States Army and Navy, DARPA, and the CIA. But now he is focusing more on other things. So please, let's welcome Dr. Claude Swanson.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Well, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
And Fahrusha, we have to give the name of his book.
Yes, we do.
Because-
he has two books, one of which I am the proud owner of. The first book, which is called The Synchronized Universe, The New Science of the Paranormal. His second book is called Life Force, The Scientific Basis, Volume 2 of the Synchronized Universe. So let me start by asking you just simply, is there a Volume 3 in the works?
The
Yeah,
trifecta.
I've been taking about 7 years per volume, unfortunately. So I'm hoping that it's soon, within a few months to a year at the max. I'm hoping within less time than that. Basically, my trajectory since I discovered remote viewing in the 1980s, and that told me that physics, as we know it, is missing a whole lot of things that our physics can't really explain. So ever since then, I've been doing research on what is missing from current Western science. So the first book was about the paranormal, and those are all kinds of phenomena that science can't explain, like ESP and remote viewing, and levitation, and near-death and out-of-body experiences. The second book, Life Force, is okay. Well, these things happen. How can we make a science? How can we understand these things? And I determined that there's something missing from our Western science. We have electromagnetism, we have quantum physics, blah, blah, blah. But there's something that the Chinese have known about for 5,000 years called qi. The Hindus call it prana. And it's been known about, it's been used by healers around the world, but it's not part of Western science. They don't have a clue what this is, and so, of course, they ignore it. And so that's the second book, is about what is this science and pulling together the best we know. And the Russians have actually figured out a lot about what it is on a scientific basis. So the next book is about the next level of subtlety, the next level of abstraction, which is the afterlife and the soul. What is the energy that makes the soul possible? How is it that the afterlife appears to be very real? and that maybe even the physical life here that we are so absorbed in, this may be the illusion, and that may be the real life. The soul life may be much more real than this. But trying to pull together the physics of it and the science behind it. So it's a big job, and there aren't as many experiments as I would like, but I've been trying to do that.
Well, that sounds really fascinating. But what occurs to me is that a lot of your research and your studies now came about due to the hard question in the study of consciousness. And you know what I'm speaking of, like the fact that, Max Planck, for instance, said that, consciousness is at the base of everything, and you just can't get behind it. You can't get behind consciousness because it is the reality behind everything. Now, would you say that this is like where many of your thoughts and studies originated, from this hard question of consciousness, or am I off?
No, you're right. It is the deep question that it's hard for anybody to access because we're in the middle of it. Can't really make it objective and look at it from outside very well. I sort of started from a more prosaic point of view, more like a scientist. The scientists noticed that when consciousness is present, that experiments get messed up, results get affected. They call it the wave function collapse, the double slit experiment that I'm sure you're familiar with. It's
yes.
A website to talk about it and things like that, that if you have a quantum system, you so describe the probability of particles by these things called wave functions, which are the waviness, the wavy probability of them being in certain places and doing certain things. And we have equations that tell us how those waves behave. But we also know that if you look at it, if a human consciousness focuses on it, that something else happens, that it affects that system. And we don't really have a theory for that. There's no physics to explain what happened when the experimenter looks inside the box. And, there've been all kinds of discussions about this. And of course, Dean Radin did some experiments a few years ago to show that even if you are just remote viewing a double slit experiment, we have photons coming along and they go through a double slit and they make a nice little interference pattern on the other side. But if you're just doing your consciousness, not with your eyeballs, not with photons, not with instruments, but just with your consciousness, it still messes up the wave function. It still affects things. So, so this, to me, this is an important step, that consciousness is something real and that it's embedded in everything else that we do and perceive in the world. And yet physics pretty much has tried to ignore it and not really face this problem.
And many neuroscientists tend to want to ignore it and take the mechanistic, materialistic view that its consciousness is an accident, and that it really has no it has no meaning beyond beyond life as we know it in 3D.
Just a real quick question, Dr. Swanson. How far is the remote viewer from the double slit experiment? Is it feet, inches, miles? Just roughly. I mean, I know you don't know exactly how far. Next room? Or?
There were a bunch of different experiments with different people doing the work. And my impression is there's a range of distances, probably to hundreds or thousands of miles.
Wow, okay.
But I haven't gone over his experiment in detail to see, but I know with other data that show that pretty much it doesn't matter. With remote viewers, it doesn't matter how far away you are. In fact, you can also affect things in the future or in the past. So time doesn't matter either.
Well, even in quantum mechanics, you have the process of entanglement, which Einstein called, action at a spooky action at a distance or whatever. So there seems to be some, as you said, hard evidence for that as well. So that's why I was interested as to how far away the remote viewer was.
Ingo Swann, by the way, Ingo Swann viewed something about the rings of Saturn that wasn't proven until years after it occurred, and perhaps even after poor Ingo's passing, that it was seen that what he had viewed remotely in all the way into Saturn. You know about that, right, Claude?
I don't know about that particular session, but I know that you can remote view out those distances. There's no problem to do it.
Yeah, it's very hard to interview you. You have about 1.5 million interesting topics here.
Yeah, I've got the book Synchronized Universe right here on the desk between us, and every chapter in your book could be a whole hour interview on shattered reality, and I'm sure that our listeners would
really,
be
very great,
very
well. Thank you. Let me just interject
sure.
that. If you put my name into Google, Claude Swanson,
Mm-hmm.
the website synchronizeduniverse.com will pop up.
Okay.
Some people who are English, not American, spell synchronized with an S, not a Z, not a Z, as they say. So that's the only possible confusion. But if you put my name into Google, the website pops up, and you can find discussions of the books there, some sample pages, and more information, and about a dozen different YouTube lectures or interviews. So you can get more information there.
Great.
I have a kind of complicated question for you, and it may include your having to explain more about the torsion situation and the subtle energy. But when they did the double slit experiments that were observed, could the spin on the electrons or subatomic particles that you speak of in torsion have an effect on the double slit, or is my physics really not up to snuff at all?
No, you're far ahead of most physicists. I just wrote a paper that's coming out. The ISSEEM, ISSSEEM organization, the Subtle Energy Organization, has a magazine called Bridges that they publish periodically, and I have a little article coming out this next month in that about that exact question. I talk about Dean Radin's experiment from the point of view of torsion, and basically that when the remote viewer or the psychic focuses his intention on the double slit, trying to perceive which hole the photon or the electron went through, that you create a torsion field there. And it is strong enough to cause the wave functions to the phases of the two slits to get scrambled, so the interference pattern goes away. So it will explain, in my opinion, Radin's experiment. And I think that, so to me, torsion is the answer to a lot of these questions about consciousness, that we really do have a field around us of consciousness, which is, in terms of physics, it's the torsion field.
Could you just go over that for me quickly? Because I'm really not too familiar with what you're referring to by torsion.
Sure.
Thank you.
In physics, if you go through the conventional Western education, go through all your courses, you say there's only four forces. There's two nuclear forces that are at very short distances inside the nucleus. Those are the strong and the weak forces. And then there's gravity, which works over big distances, and electromagnetism that works over big distances. And they say that's all there is. You learn those, so they say, and you know all of physics. Uh, the problem is you don't. They're not looking at a whole bunch of phenomena that have been discovered in the past 50 years that require something else. And like I said before, the Chinese call it qi. They've known about it for a long time. It's part of their major medicine. But in Western physics, we pretend it doesn't exist. There are Qigong masters in China who can exert physical forces with this energy. They can push things away, they can pull things toward, they can bend a laser beam 1,000 miles away, they can alter radioactive decay, they can do things that physicists would say, yeah, that's physics, okay? And if this force does those things, then it ought to be part of physics too. And the Russians have been working to expand physics, to include this energy. One of the things they've discovered is that the PK masters, if you ever have seen any of the old films with some of the Russian PK experts,
Olga.
who could move things, move objects with this force, or just go to the Princeton experiments where they cause a random event generator to change more ones than zeros because of consciousness. Those are PK effects. Those are physical effects caused purely by the mind. And this torsion field explains all those things. It's a property of space-time that needs to be included in Western physics. We talk about Einstein's theory, who said, well, gravity is really a curving of space. You have a big mass like the Earth, it bends the space around it, and that's what causes the forces we call attraction in the orbits of the planets and things like that. So he described gravity as a curving of space. What the Russians have discovered is that torsion is an additional property of space. It can also have a twist, a local little twisting motion, like a little vortex. Think about it like that. And every little particle in the universe has a spin. It's spinning like a top. Whenever that spin changes direction, it causes this twisting property in space. So these little twisting motions are propagating through space all the time. And so it's a very important force. This is what mediates consciousness. It's what the aura around the body is made of. Okay. Western scientists have trouble measuring the aura because it's not electromagnetic. It's not a field that they understand. And yet healers use it. You can learn how to feel it. It's something very real. That's made of torsion again. Consciousness is also made of torsion, and I believe the soul is made of torsion. So if we understand torsion, we understand the essence of consciousness and how it is we're able to go out of body, how we're able to go to other places and, pick up information and communicate and things like that. So the Russians say that it's really the key to all psychic phenomena.
And some of this torsion has to do with the movement of subatomic particles. As I read your book, there's some mention of that. Is that the case?
Yeah. If you were to look at every subatomic particle under a very, very powerful microscope, they don't just sit still. They're actually jiggling. They're zigzagging back and forth, and they have a random motion on a very small scale. On the average, they sit still, but they're really kind of blurry and they jiggle around because the energy of the vacuum of space is causing this random motion. That's the origin of the uncertainty principle. It's the origin of a lot of the strange properties of quantum physics. And one of the things that's causing that random motion are these little waves of torsion, which the Russians call photons. They're kind of analogous to photons, but they're made of torsion, not of electromagnetic energy. But you're right, at the very small scale in the vacuum of space, this is very, very important. The vacuum is filled with these little waves, and they really have a lot to do with how physics occurs, how motion occurs, how forces occur, and the Russians have been sort of the leaders in figuring out what this energy is, how to manipulate it.
It has nothing, excuse me, nothing to do with the string theory then.
Well, not in any.
I mean, that was just an attempt to sort of explain that type of force.
Yeah. Now it may we may be able to connect it up at some point.
Right.
The string theory is a Western direction that particle physicists have gone. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was saying it sounds like it was an attempt to sort of westernize the other theory, but yours actually makes a lot of sense. It really does. I mean, from a non-physics, from a layperson, it just sounds like a very good explanation.
Yeah, one problem is that there's a cultural issue here.
Right.
That Western scientists they talk to each other, and what they work on is dictated by government funding. So is funding string theory, then they work on string theory, and they usually go and ask the top string theorists, what do you think we ought to work on? Hey, string theory. So you get these fads that go on for decades,
right? And
the problems has been that no one can solve some of the string theory equations or even make predictions from them. The big problem is they're kind of divorced from experiment because they can't make predictions with their theory. It's so complicated. So they can't really measure these strings. They can't see these strings. And there's no feedback from the real world of experiment. In the case of the Russians, it's been just the opposite. There's been a very heavy experimental component in the torsion research and a lot of feedback between theory and experiments. So they have dozens upon dozens of experiments that show the effects of torsion. So it's, and I, as far as why these two groups aren't talking to each other, that may be partly cultural. It may be that, that there are government programs that work on torsion, but they're not going to tell you about them, perhaps. That's another possibility, because we know that remote viewing went on for 20 years, CIA funded, and was all secret. Nobody talked about it. So who knows what else might be going on. I'd like to think that somewhere in the U.S. there's people working on torsion, but it's hard to prove that.
Well, you have the clash of egos too. I mean, certainly that's not to minimalize that.
No, they're very human, right?
Just to, since you mentioned sort of fads in physics, there's a theory that I have some interest in, but I'm not sure about the validity of it, and that has to do with the idea of our 3D or 4D reality being a matrix. Now, that does figure in a little bit with the idea that the bigger reality comes to us, perhaps to our souls in an after-death manner. But where do you come down on the matrix theory, the matrix theory of reality?
You're asking if I've taken the red pill? Yeah, I definitely believe that. That's what people who have near-death experiences, or when they die. One of my favorite people is Dolores Cannon, who hypnotized clients for 40 years, thousands of people, and would develop a pretty good understanding of the afterlife and the whole system from that. And when you regress people through the death process into the afterlife, or it oftentimes happens in their death experiences as well, all of a sudden they look back at the physical reality that we thought was so important and so tangible, and they realize, oh, it was just a play. It was just an illusion. it wasn't really the important thing. It's the other stuff, the soul life, the energy in the afterlife. That's where the action is, And this is kind of an illusion that's set up for us to have our experiences and to, learn things. Um, so I definitely would go along with the matrix idea or the holographic idea that physical reality is, in a sense, an illusion. In fact, the synchronized universe, my first book, kind of led me to that idea independently because there's so many phenomena like teleportation, for example. There are young people in China who are very gifted. They've done experiments with them at teleporting objects. You take a little glass of beans, for example, or seeds, put them in a bottle, seal the bottle up with tape, put the bottle inside a box, seal the box up, then hand it to them and say, okay, now remove the seeds. Don't open the box, but remove the seeds. And they can do it. They teleport the seeds outside of the bottle. Okay, and so there are lots of people who can do these things, and they show us that physical matter is not what we thought it was, that there's a transparency there. And so the synchronized universe model that I propose in my book is a way to explain how that can be. And that also takes you back to the idea that it's really an illusion. And the conditions make it feel real to us, but at a higher level, there's a holographic property to it.
Well, it sounds like it's a very comforting theory to know that, we go on and so on. And I mean, not to be totally crass, but is there any practical applications to this that you see, like perhaps, I mean, really silly stuff, but like increasing a computer speed or even invoking artificial intelligence with this type of a force that would make it a little bit more real?
Well, I mean, yogis and adepts and wise men have been doing this for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
This is the purpose of the meditation they go through, the disciplines they go through, that they can tap into universal consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing about the torsion field is it has elements that travel both much faster than light and also elements that travel backwards in time.
Mm.
And that means that we are connected with everything else in the universe that's ever happened, will ever happen, and is happening now. So we're really part of this huge supercomputer called the universe. And when you enter altered states, as the yogis do, they can tap into that knowledge. They call that the Akashic record. That information is available all the time. So I think that would be the goal of computer programmers, or if they would just meditate, maybe they wouldn't need to build the computer, But
that would be good.
But that information is carried in the torsion field, which is this very fine scale energy that I was mentioning before. So it's kind of passing through every point of space-time all the time. It's always present. So that's a much more advanced technology than what we have today.
One very practical application of some of this knowledge is the idea of changing the past in a way that involves one's relationships. If one can send love back to one's earlier self or information back to one's younger self, but one also can heal relationships from the past by sending loving feelings to whatever was the cause of the friction between two or more people. And the results are really phenomenal that I have witnessed myself.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk to you more about that. When I when I was in therapy many years ago, uh, my therapist would have me practice exercises like that. If you go back to some traumatic event in childhood, for example, and you feel so alone, if you can go back in the form of your higher self and comfort that little child that is going through the difficult situation, you can heal the pain, heal the trauma from early events, and provide the love that you may have been missing at the time or thought you were missing. So you're right. Now, from a scientific point of view, it's interesting because what that means is that now as you come forward again in the timeline, as you move back into the future, you're really on a different path than you were before.
Yes.
So synchronized universe idea where there are multiple parallel realities, actually you need something like that to help explain it. We have these parallel realities, and we end up coming back on a slightly different reality than we were on before. And if you think about the movie Back to the Future, it really has that philosophy built into it, so that every time he went back into the past and he changed something, it came into the future, it was different. So
Once you start talking about time, that's when my mind just goes totally blank.
yeah, well, it is mind-boggling.
It is. Time is real. Somebody said once that that there, and this would agree with what you say about everything happening at the same time. They said that everything does happen simultaneously. Everything that ever was is now, and the human mind can't comprehend that, so it invents time to separate events. And that sort of made more sense to me than anything else. But I cannot imagine everything. Like once the Big Bang happened, let's just postulate Big Bang, and bam, from there, everything was created. Boom, right now. So, which sort of bad because then that gets into the fate, free will versus determinism, and that's when they lose me, and I'm like,
multiple
no.
universes,
Yeah.
multiple universes.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I really that type of philosophy. No.
You can't go there, Kate.
No, I'm sorry. No.
No. I would expect to say it's all simultaneous.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are other sources that do paint a picture where we learn from the past life experience, so the next lifetime we do it better. Like Daniel Brinkley talks about 3 near-death experiences. Each time he died and came into his past life regression, his panoramic life review, he saw all the things he'd seen before, but he also saw the new things, all the good things he'd done since then that really made him happy. So there was a definite progression and a learning as well. So yeah, you have these two contradictory theories about these parallel times, and I think I'm still working on that. I've got to figure that one out for the book. So.
Good luck.
Well, there's the idea that anything that could happen is true somewhere.
Yeah.
Briefly, that some Russian scientists have used this torsion force to build simple time machines.
Oh.
They don't so far project to some future event, like in Back to the Future. They do slow down time or speed up time. They can generate torsion waves of either left-handed or right-handed polarity and fill up a chamber with more of one kind or more of the other kind. The rate of time ends up being different than it is in the outside world. So that's kind of interesting.
Wow.
I have one thought about all of that, which goes beyond, time travel for humans, like the biological entities that are humans or dogs or cats or whatever. And it kind of boggles my mind that a person could be a time traveler unless they engaged in space travel where they were going so fast that they remained younger and when they came back to Earth, et cetera, et cetera. But the reason why I can't imagine time travel for a biological entity is because of the location of the stars. When let's just take a big event in human history. Let's take the birth of Christ, okay? And let's say that there really was a individual, a person named Jesus Christ or something similar in his own language in Aramaic that was born at approximately 0 AD or 4 AD. Well, the stars were in a certain place at that time. So if in order to go back in time, the stars, you have to actually be in a different cosmologic universe that existed then.
I told you, don't mess around with time.
Does that make any sense, that thought, or not?
Yeah, actually it does, especially with Dr. Swanson's theory, because your torsion, your vortices would then sort of coincide with the vortices of that time. And so everything would be real for you at that time. And then when you came back to this time, you would then be in sync with these vortices.
Well, it seems to me that your mind, your consciousness could go back to that time, but your in terms of a time machine where your
like
biological entity, I can't see that. But that's just me. In any case, I think that we're getting really deep here, and I don't want to lose our listeners.
Well, Fahrusha's perusing through the book.
No, but I'm saying there's so much
Can I just
here.
ask you a quick question, Dr. Swan? Obviously, you started out as a sort of a westernized physicist, and you then came into this field, and I can see why. It's far more interesting than the old, how fast does it take a ball to run down an inclined plane?
Right. Yeah. Once you've seen one, you've seen them all.
There you go. But I really like the direction of this physics, because it to me it's a prime mover. I mean, what we're seeing is what occurs as a result of this, and I think you're absolutely on the right track by so how did you get into, because I'm sure getting grants and and all that stuff and getting invited to conferences started to sort of just gradually dwindle away.
Well, it all started, and I was very innocent. I grew up in a small town in the South, and you're in nature, and you look up at the stars, and you have questions, you have curiosity, you want to know how things work, and eventually I figured out in school that the way you figure out science has the answers. If you want to figure out how things work, you have to go into science. It has a process. You do experiments, and you have theories, and there's an actual procedure to figure out the answer to things. So that was what got me into science, and I really thought that I would get all the answers. And what I got ended up feeling superficial. It felt like a lot of the science we have comes from making observations. We see certain things like gravity exerts a force on a mass and it pulls it and things like that. Okay. But as far as the deeper question of why it does, why it is the way it is, physics tends to gloss over a lot of the deep questions. And Einstein was a deep thinker, and his theories you could kind of express, in a sentence or two, the basic idea. Richard Feynman, who was one of my all-time favorite physicists, said that if mathematics disappeared, it would set physics back about 1 week.
That's great.
But that, I think he was really saying, is the physical ideas that are the important part of science. Now, most physicists probably wouldn't either agree or understand that, but that's how I understand it. So, but there aren't enough of those ideas, and a lot of things don't get explained. Of course, the things that you see that are presented in school, in class, are the ones that they can explain.
Mm.
So they show you, gases expanding and
Mm-hmm.
electromagnetic forces moving and things like that. And you go into the lab and you duplicate that, and you say, "Oh yeah, it does work. It must be all correct because it does it just the way they said." But they don't show you the things that don't agree.
Mm.
Okay,
Yeah.
they don't take you into a haunted house. Okay, where you have a cold spot that feels 10 degrees colder than anywhere else, or you see orbs flying around,
Mm-hmm.
or out of a near-death experience, or all the ESP, all the Princeton Pear Lab experiments that show that consciousness is measurable, even though it can't be explained by Western physics. What did it for me, what started me on this path, was in the mid 1980s when I learned about remote viewing. And I began finding out that remote viewing actually does occur and is real, but that you can use it to see through barriers, see through metal shielding, see thousands of miles away into the past. It doesn't matter, and that's not a force that our Western science has. So that told me that something really important was left out. So once I knew that, then I began asking, well, what else has been left out?
Mm.
Yes.
Well, I think that's where you started, Fahrusha, too, right? With remote viewing. I mean, that was sort of a life changer for you.
Well, it was, but yes, I would say I enjoyed going to remote viewing classes, and I've studied remote viewing with a number of the former government remote viewers. But I was a psychic reader before then,
Right.
and it was a sort of a tradition in my family more than anything else. And it's just since the remote viewers and the Monroe Institute and wonderful people like our wonderful guest, Dr. Claude Swanson, it became more okay to be a psychic reader or an intuitive or do any of these things. So I can't tell you how much we appreciate people such as yourself and Russell Targ. Do you want to mention your books again?
Yeah, that would.
Because that's what we like to give
Sure.
you a
Yeah.
plug here for the
Well,
books.
it's not only that, but I think the listeners, our type of listener, would be fascinated in some of these subjects.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
we just
This
don't
is-
have enough time
This
to
is
cover
just
it.
a compendium. I mean, there is just no doubt about it. There's so much information in these books that they're wonderful. They are wonderful. So go ahead,
Well,
please.
the easiest way is take my name, Claude Swanson, and put that into Google, and it'll take you to my website, synchronizeduniverse.com. And it describes the books there, and there are links to Amazon where you can purchase the books. Or you can just go to Amazon and look up Claude Swanson and look for my two books. One is called Synchronized Universe, New Science of the Paranormal. The other is called Life Force, The Scientific Basis. So either way, you can go to Amazon or to the website and find it.
So the thing that is interesting to me from a point of view of somebody who works in these fields, the idea of intention. Now, let's say that you have a few people that aren't as adept as these children in China, for instance, but are averagely, they can sing happy birthday in terms of psychic phenomena, but they're not Pavarotti. And so, if you get more than one person exerting the same intention, that seems to kind of double up the chances that you are able to have an effect on the physical universe. And I don't know if it was Dean Radin or another parapsychological force out there in our universe that had done some experiments that indicated that you can change any given outcome by about 6% per intention, but if more than one person is intending for the same event, this is not all of future, but like the outcome of a horse race or something, just one event, that if more than one person is intending, that can skew things even more. Would you say that that is a part of torsion? I would expect it might be.
Yeah, I would. I would. Um, you can think about it uh, in a way. In a way, one way of thinking about it is if you, because torsion is able to stretch or compress space and also stretch or compress time. So you can impose patterns on space time, which means you can make certain events or certain objects more likely to appear or to occur by visualizing the outline of the event or the item that you. Um, Hal Puthoff, who's a great physicist, one of the people who started the remote viewing program, and also has been active in psychic research with Uri Geller and other people, used to say that he believed that if you visualize a blue sphere, a blue ball hovering in front of your face, you just picture it there and picture it intensely enough that to some extent it is really there. And to some extent, the probability of it popping in and appearing becomes increased by the act of visualizing. The way I think about it is that the torsion field starts to shift to make the probability that that thing will appear there become greater. And that maybe that's a little bit of an extreme example, but some background of the torsion field. Uh, it's associated with every pattern and every object. So, for example, a pyramid has an aura to it. It has a framework that is how it changes the space around it. And there's a torsion field associated with that. So the power of intention, to me, is how we shape that torsion field to make what we want more likely to appear.
Okay. I'm sorry, but that picture of what Hal Puthoff said brings to mind to me UFOs.
Oh, what? Well, all right. Well, all right. Now I have a little confession to make. During the UFO show that I had, I was frequently asked if I had my druthers, how would I like what explanation would I like to have for a UFO? And there's a lot of various sort of fields, but my preference would always been a real nuts and bolts type craft with beings on it that you could actually eventually communicate with in some form, and not something that pops in and out of dimensions and that has spiritual beings. I mean, that's fine, and God bless him, but I wanted a Klingon craft without its warlike intentions. You know, I really wanted something I could put my hands on, and, you know, my father once, I was sort of engaging in this philosophy with him when I was in college, and he's, telling about reality and blah, blah, blah. And so he said, yeah, well, I think I told you this first. Yes. Yeah. Let me tell you, kids, you stub your toe, it's going to hurt. But that begs, I think what we're talking is reality is actually an emerging quality of what you're describing. And I think you're at the base of it all. Really, it's a fascinating theory that you have here. I like it. It's some things just seem right when you hear them, and it just seems right.
Yes.
Well, the other thing to remember is that we humans are at various different stages of evolution. If you go from one person, even in a crowd of people in a store, you'll find many different levels of involvement that pick people out of the crowd. If, in addition, you start going to other planets where civilizations might have been evolving for millions or even billions of years, you're going to find beings that are much more evolved than anything we've ever encountered. I mean, we have here on this planet yogis and adepts and masters who can do some of these magical things, and they're pretty well documented. Some of them have been studied. And so we know that some of these abilities exist among humans, but they're pretty rare. But if you have a planet that's been evolving separately and is for much longer, it's not surprising to have a craft of beings that to us would be like gods, that could levitate and would be more like Christ or more like Buddha in their normal way of thinking about the world. They've all become enlightened by our standards. That was a long time ago for them. That was their third grade, test or something. So some of these planets have beings that have evolved far beyond us. Now, if you prefer to meet the Klingons,
yes.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I say uh-oh to that.
More power to you, but keep your phasers loaded, if you have to do that.
Well, I myself, Fahrusha here, sort of I flirt with the idea of the panspermia that is evidenced there by Dr. Chanda Wikarama Singh.
She says that just because she can pronounce his name and I can't.
That was impressive, yes.
But I really have to say that most things, and of need be, it's necessary that most things that we discuss have to do with human beings. But my own sort of cosmology, using the word in a broader context, it includes that consciousness is all around us. It's in the earth itself, that even inanimate objects may have some rudimentary form of consciousness, and certainly the heavenly spheres must, and that animals have great consciousness in themselves. And I know that Kate and I both have very strong relationships with companion animals, but just as we were getting ready, as I was getting ready to be speaking to you, perusing the science news on the internet, I discovered that scientists just in this past week have published some form of a document about how porpoises, dolphins, speak to one another. And this was actually, you'll be interested to hear, Claude, if you hadn't read about this quite yet, that it was in the Black Sea of Russia. I believe it was Black Sea bottlenose dolphins that the Russians were monitoring, and they found that they were clicking back and forth between one another, two female bottlenose dolphins, and they were actually speaking what could be determined to be sentences to one another, and it's all quite fascinating.
That goes back a long time, though. Actually, and sadly enough, the United States Navy tried to use it for defense or
yes,
information
to blow them
things.
up and so forth.
Yeah.
Just
no, not
terrible.
to blow them up,
but they
to
would
train
go
them
and
as little spies.
dismantle. That's
Oh, they have a real sense. I told you, I did a little bit of marine biology, and we used to put ropes in the salt water, and they would get really, really tight. And one day we were pulling the dredge up, and all of a sudden the rope goes, and this pair of dolphins that were always around us sort of both came up the water at the same time as we pulled up this dead end of rope, and they're both going, and off they went. No, and that was planned. It was.
that's
so I
funny.
mean,
That's
yeah,
very
but it's
funny.
true. It's a true story. They're very intelligent animals, and it's a sin the way the whales and the dolphins are treated. But I mean, we won't get
the
into
way
animal
all
abuse
animals are
or
treated.
poor Dr. Swanson.
Yes, no, but what I'm saying is that only in that way would I say to Dr. Swanson, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
No, he went out fishing.
He went out for a milkshake, but only in that way would I say that perhaps that my tent is bigger than yours, though your tent is certainly very, very large. I just don't believe that humans are the crown of creation. And clearly, when you're talking about other civilizations in the cosmos, clearly you don't either necessarily. I'm not against humans, but I don't think that the average human really conceptualizes that their place in the cosmos is not really the center of everything.
No, I think that's sort of the male-oriented sciences.
Earth
Go
the
ahead.
Earth is considered to be an entry-level planet.
Really? Oh, well.
This is where the new souls come, and they kind of get their experiences being physical and things like that. But I think that when people evolve to a certain level, then they might not come back to the earth after that. So we may not see so many adepts and masters here on the planet as we might like, because there are other places that they may go. You can read Yogananda, the great yogi from India who brought self-realization fellowship to America years ago, and his teacher, Sri Yukteswar from India, died when Yogananda was away, and Yogananda was bereft about this, and was sitting in his room one night, and his master appeared to him in a fully material form. Yogananda ran up to him. He could smell him. He could hug him. He could touch him, even though his master had been gone and buried or cremated for months. And they had a conversation, and it's in chapter 43 of Yogananda's autobiography, and it's fascinating because he asks his teacher, "What have you been doing? where have you been? What you been doing?" and things like that. And Sri Yukteswar explains that he is now a teacher, a guru on another planet, which is of a higher dimension, an astral planet. And he goes on to comment how there are many planets of higher dimensions in our universe that we probably wouldn't even perceive. And so beings, when they reach a certain level, they can, incarnate on other places. So it's a much richer, multi-level picture of the universe than we normally think of.
Wow. What are your feelings about artificial intelligence? Do you think is that just sort of a computer game, or do you think there's some possible reality there?
I think one of the problems right now is that computer scientists have this very materialistic idea the brain is and of what intelligence is. It's a mechanistic picture that comes from Western science. So if you go to conferences on consciousness, everything is pretty much modeled on the computer. So they're missing the really special aspect of us humans, that we have this spiritual connection, this right brain that can connect through the torsion field, in my opinion, to all kinds of other information. You can read the Akashic record. You can do remote viewing. You can do out-of-body experiences. You can tune into information that a computer made of silicon chips can't do. And of course, that's not what the computer scientists are educated to believe. So I just have spoken heresy, as far as they're concerned. But that's where we humans have an advantage over computers. We can get these brilliant ideas, these inspirations, which computers arrive logically at whatever they come up with. And in my book on the afterlife that I've been writing, I've learned a lot about what life is like on these higher planes. And the scientists who die, like Tesla or Edison, they don't stop inventing. Their souls are still totally intact. They keep on inventing on these higher planes. And in many cases, they send back to us humans ideas. Get an inspiration.
Wow.
That light bulb comes on. It's often communication with a spirit that just gave you an idea and popped into your head, and you think you thought of it, but somebody else might have told it to you, and you just don't really know it. And the big problem, according to these many communications that I've got, these that come from mediums and near-death experiences and other sources, the big problem they have is that they can't give us just any idea, because we humans tend to misuse what they give. They'll turn it into a weapon. So they have to be very, they're very careful in what they can tell us.
Yeah, just like the stupid Navy with the dolphins. I mean, no, really. I mean, they use them as a weapon.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Just anyway.
Well, I wonder.
But you're right.
We had a brief discussion before you came on a couple of days ago, I guess, and we spoke to some extent about having a near-death experience and how that kind of opens things up for a person, and that neither of us to date had one, or neither has Kate that I know of.
No. I would have remembered that.
But I wonder, with you you've been pursuing all of this now for a number of years, and if you have found that you have had more psychic experiences than prior to the study that you've been undergoing. Claude? Yeah.
No. Has this affected you? Have you had experiences?
Yes. What
along
experiences have you?
I've never had a near-death experience. Sometimes I think that if I don't hurry up finishing my book, I might have one. I might have to channel it from the other side, and that would not be my first choice.
If I'm here, I'll write it. If you're gone and I'm here, I volunteer. I'm joking you. I'm sure you'll outlive me.
One fascinating book that I read was by purportedly a bishop in the Church of England. His father had been Archbishop of Canterbury. He was a noted scholar and theologian who wrote with great authority and assurance about the afterlife. He thought based on church doctrine, but he also had some psychic ability, and he met a couple of spirits along the way and had some communication, and it caused him not to be so sure that the doctrine was 100% correct. So he made an agreement with a medium. He got to know a medium before he passed away. And he began coming to her after he died and describing his experiences. And, by and large, what he said was that, things aren't exactly the way I thought they were going to be.
Well, what I want to know for sure is that my pets and my friendship with my animals around me will, in some way, even with trees and other non-human entities, will continue, because I feel like my experiences with the non-human entities, in many cases, trump my experiences with the human entities. And I have lots of good human friends as well. But I really am looking forward in my death state to reconnect with animals that I've known who have passed ahead of me, for instance.
Yeah, animals certainly. You find animals over there for sure.
That would be a good thing.
Well, we have to apologize to you, because I think that our interview is a lot more conversational than some other interviews, and we go off into some very sort of labyrinthian topics. But I think that's the charm of Shattered Reality.
Let's hope.
Let's hope, yes. But I want to thank you so very much for being with us, and I hope that you will come and join us again. I think there's so much more to talk to you about, and we appreciate that you've been on. You just really have suffered fools gladly here.
You guys, you're both delightful, and you're fellow explorers. We're all just trying to learn about what's out there.
That's for sure.
Psychonauts, we are. Well, thank you so much.
Really, very much. Thank you.
From us here at Shattered Reality, as we bid Dr. Claude Swanson a farewell. Adieu.
Thanks again, Doctor.
Great, thank you. I enjoyed it. Okay,
so did I.
Okay, bye now.
Bye.
So that was exciting,
terrific.
right?
Yeah.
That was a good one.
I like that. That was fun.
It
was
was really, really good, and he's a very good sport because he's just such an intelligent man with so much going on, and he listened to our questions very patiently.
I know. It reminds me sort of us talking to our dogs. You know?
him talking to us is like us talking to our
dogs,
pets.
yeah.
Yes. What I have one other announcement to make, that there is a friend of Shattered Reality podcast who is adept at Taoism, I would say, and her name is Sharon Smith. She is a friend of mine, and she's an astrologer, but she's also a talented photographer and independent filmmaker. And I remember about a year ago, I mentioned her film, which is called Saturn Saved Me. And she has just now released it for viewing on the internet on VHX TV. The film is set in India, where Sharon has been numerous times. I've never been myself. It's one of my bucket list things here. But she has gone to India a number of times, and she's visited with astrologers and other soothsayers of India, prognosticators as it is. And she has created this film pretty much on her own, which I have to say that's
hard.
And she's won, a couple of awards for it. I think it's about 45 minutes long, but I'd have to check on that. I saw it myself. I was very impressed. It's visually rich, and to me, part of what it does is it points up the difference between readers of any form of psychic reading in the West and readers in the East, as in India particularly, because in India there's a great deal of focus put on predestination, whereas in the West, most readers will tell you that you have some amount of free will. There may be certain things that are predestined, but often in your life you have some free will. So that is my little announcement. So get out there and see.
What was the name of it again?
Saturn Saved Me.
Okay.
It's $3.99 on VHX TV, and I recommend it for people who are interested in India or astrology or predestination or any number of things like that.
Cool.
So coming up on our podcast, we expect that we are going to be featuring Artie Six Killer Clark next time, and her conversations with indigenous Americans, the Native Americans from both the United States and points north and south, their conversations, their experiences with the star people. And this has to do with what everybody sees in the night sky. Not everybody, but fortunate people, or some of them unfortunate people, see UFOs. And some of us have had experiences with extraterrestrials. And so we are going to be talking to Professor Six Killer Clark and getting her ideas about what has come from the anthropological evidence from Native American peoples about the star people.
I'm trying to think of the man's name. He was also in the UFO field, and it was with the airport, O'Hare Airport.
Yes.
In Chicago with that sighting, and he was involved. Who? Sam? Yeah, maybe. I can't think of his name. But what he did, he had a side interest, and it was with the Hopi Indians and their petroglyphs. And there was remember that he was saying that he was investigating, it was like a black substance within the petroglyph, and he felt that there may have been some DNA contained in that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
Is it the fellow who was with MUFON in the Chicago area? Was it Sam Marantz or something like that?
Yeah.
Marantz.
Yeah.
Marantz.
Yeah, good memory. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then he sort of faded away. You didn't hear that much from him. I don't think it was anything nefarious. I think he just sort of lost interest, or
he might still be
investigating and just not publishing
that we've seen. But we could certainly think about getting him on as well. He sounds like a very interesting fellow. I've seen him at some of the UFO
he's a really
conferences.
Nice fellow, but I don't know how far he got with that. I think it was just stayed as a theory. But even Dr. Swanson too was mentioning referencing the Hopi Indians.
The Hopi Indians,
Yeah.
sure. And when I was down at the national park down there in Arizona, I had an experience, a out of body dream experience with some of the Kachinas there, and I wrote about it on my blog, which is Fahrusha.wordpress.com. Plug my blog. Anyway, I think it's time that we need to say.
Oh, I guess so.
Do you think? And do you have any? Do you have any announcements?
No, I'm good.
Good.
I'm
Okay.
good.
So we are so silly today. We are in a very silly mood.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Next week will be the big.
Next week will be Artie 6 Killer Clock.
Yes.
And
yes.
let's say adieu,
Adieu.
adios,
Goodbye. whatever.
tschüss, tschüss
Yeah,
from
okay.
Shattered Reality Podcast.